Pressure on Ruger didn't come from Congress or the courts this time. It came from a single letter that hit harder than most legislation. Activists just opened a brand new front in the gun debate, and Ruger's RXM is the test case they want to break first. This move isn't a warning shot. It's an opening strike. Hey, this is Ted from Line 45, and I'm walking you through why this attack on Ruger is way bigger than one pistol, and how it could reshape the entire fight over gun rights if the company folds or fights back. Before we dive in, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe, tap the bell, hit all the dang buttons down there. You don't gotta, but it keeps this train rolling and lets me crank out more of this wild gun talk for y'all. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to it. The letter that started the fight. When I started looking at this whole Ruger mess, the thing that jumped out at me was that it did not start with a new law or some wild court ruling. It started with a 6-page letter that Everytown for Gun Safety sent straight to Ruger's general counsel on the 3rd of November 2025, calling out one pistol by name, the RXM, and basically telling Ruger to pull it or redesign it. In that letter, Everytown says Ruger ran toward the Glock-style design when it launched the RXM in December 2024, copying the cruciform-style trigger bar and making the gun accept Glock aftermarket parts. They argue that the same layout that made Glock vulnerable to switches and auto-sears now makes the RXM easily converted to an illegal machine gun, and they point to online videos of people actually running RXMs with conversion devices as proof. They tie that to the ATF's own reporting about a steep rise in recovered conversion devices and illegally converted pistols over the last few years, and they frame the RXM as adding fuel to that fire. Everytown does not just complain. They give Ruger a take-it-or-leave-it choice. Either stop making and selling the RXM or change the design so it is harder to convert. They also lean on Glock's recent decision to phase out its old models and bring in the new V-series after lawsuits and state-level pressure. And they present that as the responsible example Ruger is supposed to follow. So, before any lawsuit, before any ban, that one letter is what kicked off the legal fight around this gun. What makes the RXM a lightning rod? If you have not seen the RXM yet, picture what Ruger actually built here. They teamed up with Magpul and basically took a striker-fired 9mm, dropped a removable fire control insert into a Magpul grip module, and made it work with a ton of Glock Gen 3 parts and Glock 19 mags. No cap. Ruger's own launch info talks about that stainless fire control insert, the Magpul enhanced handgun grip, and direct mount cuts for RMR, Delta Point Pro, and RMSC optics, so you are getting a modular, optics-ready pistol out of the box. On top of that, you have reviewers and industry write-ups pointing out that the RXM accepts roughly 90% of Gen 3 type parts. Triggers, striker assemblies, extractors, iron sights, mags, slide cover plates, and even most Glock 19 holsters all work with this thing. That is the whole sales pitch. Buy one gun and tap into the entire Glock aftermarket. For normal shooters, that is convenient. For activists and some attorneys general, that modularity is exactly what they are circling in red. Everytown leans into that in their letter and in their press release. They point to online videos of RXMs running with illegal conversion devices and argue that a Glock-compatible layout plus a removable fire control group makes the RXM a high-risk platform for machine gun switches. Connecticut's Attorney General picked up the same angle, warning Ruger that if an RXM can be turned into a machine gun with an MCD, they could be on the hook under state reasonable controls laws. So the RXM is catching heat because the design hits 3 boxes at once: modular, Glock-compatible, and already showing up in conversion videos. That combo is what turned this pistol into a legal magnet. The data they're using against Ruger. On the numbers side, I dug into what they keep waving around in these letters. The big headline stat you'll hear is that machine gun conversion devices exploded in the data. No cap. ATF and DOJ have both put out numbers showing that from 2017 to 2021, they recovered about 5,454 conversion devices, which they describe as roughly a 570% jump over the previous 5-year window. More recent NFCTA data is where that 784% line comes from. Between 2019 and 2023, law enforcement reported 11,088 conversion devices recovered, with 5,816 of those in 2023 alone. Reuters and other outlets summed that up as a 784% increase over that period, and Everytown basically lifts that curve as Exhibit A for why platforms like Glock and now the RXM are a problem. They pair that with the ghost gun surge and say you have two parallel pipelines growing fast: home-built guns and converted pistols. Where it gets interesting is when you look at proportions instead of just the percentage jump. One ATF example out of Minnesota had 5,206 crime guns traced in 2023, and only 88 of those were machine guns or converted into one. That is serious, but it is still a small slice of the overall crime gun pool. Activists lean hard on the growth rate to argue that ease of conversion is now a design defect. Ruger and other manufacturers point back to the same data and say these are illegal aftermarket parts, already classified as machine guns, already banned, and that the underlying pistols are being used lawfully by the vast majority of owners. Ruger's past stance, and why this case is different. Looking at how Ruger handled pressure in the past helps explain why this RXM fight hits different. Back in 2018, big institutional investors pushed a shareholder resolution that forced Ruger to issue a full report on gun safety and how it monitors the misuse of its products. That resolution actually passed with almost 70% support, including outfits like BlackRock and Vanguard, so shareholders were clearly leaning on Ruger to do more on the PR and risk side. Ruger's response in that report was pretty blunt. They said the company focuses on making lawful products and that the intentional criminal misuse of firearms is beyond our control. They also made it clear they do not track downstream misuse of specific guns and were not signing up for smart gun experiments or broad design changes just because activists or a few funds wanted it. Activist groups slammed that report as dismissive, but Ruger basically held its ground and kept the product line moving. Now compare that to what is happening with the RXM. This is not just a shareholder sentiment fight inside a proxy statement. Everytown is calling the RXM out by name in a public open letter, and the Connecticut Attorney General is backing that up with his own demand letter under the Firearms Industry Responsibility Act, talking about reasonable controls and potential violations if Ruger sells guns that can be easily converted. That opens the door to state-level civil liability in a way Ruger did not face back in 2018. On top of that, everybody in this space just watched Glock get hit with lawsuits from Maryland, Baltimore, Chicago, Minnesota, and New Jersey over switches, then roll into a new V-series after years of that pressure. Ruger knows that if they misplay this RXM situation, they could end up on the same path, with one pistol design dragging them into a long, expensive legal grind. The new anti-gun strategy. One thing that jumps out at me in this whole Ruger RXM situation is how little of it runs through Congress. Instead of chasing new federal gun bans that stall out, a lot of these groups and state officials are targeting the companies directly and using liability laws, reasonable controls, statutes, and public nuisance theories to get where they want to go. You can see that pattern with New York's public nuisance gun law, New Jersey's similar statute, and Connecticut's Firearms Industry Responsibility Act, which is the one their AG is now waving at Ruger. Those laws are written specifically to punch through the federal PLCAA shield by claiming the company's conduct is unreasonable or violates state standards. We just watched that play out with Glock. Multiple suits from places like Chicago, Maryland, and New York go after Glock over switches, arguing that the design and marketing allowed easy conversion and that Glock failed to put in reasonable controls. Remington got dragged through years of litigation over Sandy Hook before its insurers agreed to a $73 million settlement under Connecticut law. Mexico even tried to sue U.S. manufacturers in federal court over cartel guns, using nuisance and negligence theories tied to export and distribution practices. Not all of these cases win, but they show the playbook. So when Everytown and the Connecticut AG point at the RXM and say, "You need to redesign or pull this," they are plugging Ruger into that same framework. The goal is to make it riskier and more expensive to keep a design on the market than to kill it on the front end. If that strategy works on something like the RXM, you are going to see the same script run on other modular pistols, pistol-caliber carbines, and anything that shares a big aftermarket ecosystem. The fallout if Ruger fights or folds. Looking ahead, this whole thing really boils down to how Ruger reacts to that pressure. If Ruger quietly tweaks the RXM, kills the Glock parts compatibility, or just discontinues it, that is going to read as a win for Everytown and for Connecticut's AG. Gun control groups will point to it as proof that the reasonable controls and nuisance law approach works, and you can bet other brands with modular pistols or big aftermarket ecosystems are going to get hit with the same letters. From a risk management angle, corporate lawyers will start asking engineers up front, can this be converted with anything already on the street? And every yes is going to be a liability problem. If Ruger digs in and fights, we end up in a different lane. That could mean state-level litigation, where courts have to answer whether sharing a parts ecosystem with Glock or being capable of illegal conversion through a banned device makes a design unreasonable under these new statutes. If a court says no and tosses those claims, that gives manufacturers some backbone and a little clearer map on what is legally safe in terms of design. If a court says yes and lets those claims move forward, manufacturers are going to start de-risking product lines hard because nobody wants to be the next multi-year test case. For regular gun owners, the RXM is basically a stress test. If this strategy works here, you will see more guns vanish at the design stage, more feature deletes, and fewer truly modular guns reaching the shelf. If it stalls out, companies are going to feel a lot better about building modern designs and pointing at PLCAA and existing criminal laws when activists try to hang illegal conversion on them.